artist from London, England. Growing up in Tottenham, he fell in with the gang life from a young age and had been in trouble with the law numerous times in his teenage years, having been arrested for beating an ex-girlfriend and also threatening someone with an air gun, though he was also on the receiving end of violent crime himself, being the victim of a stabbing. It was in his teen years that he discovered his passion for music and began producing his own grime and hip-hop music, which would see airplay on various pirate radio stations in London. This led to him catching the eye of the grime group Boy Better Know, and he was brought into the group as a new member in the mid-2000s. Joining Boy Better Know exposed him to a wider audience and led to him performing to crowds of thousands rather than the small clubs where he would perform for probably less than 100 people prior to this. He would continue performing with Boy Better Know until he released his first solo single in 2014 entitled Feed 'Em to the Lions, which would become a big hit for him and to this day is generally considered to be his signature song. The success of Feed 'Em to the Lions led to him being signed to the legendary Island Records, a label which has counted many notable artists among its lineup, such as Ariana Grande, The Weeknd, Shawn Mendes, KSI, and of course, the Insane Clown Posse. Hey, Violent J was nice enough to give my Evil Wrestlers video a shout out. So these guys are awesome in my book. Being signed to such a major label allowed Inoki, now going by the stage name Solo 45, to move out to the rough neighborhoods of Tottenham and settle in a fancy riverside apartment in Bristol. All in all, things were definitely on the up for him. His career was about to take off, and he'd finally managed to leave his old life behind and move to a much better area, so it looked like he was heading to stardom. Unfortunately for him, this would not be the case, as he would eventually find himself in trouble with the law for a truly vile offense. In April 2017, a woman reported him to the police for a vicious assault in which he had brutally tortured her, with him even going as far as attempting to suffocate her through waterboarding. Solo 45 was immediately arrested, with the police searching his apartment for any more evidence of foul play. When they searched his phone, they discovered that he had thousands of videos of women being tortured. Solo's court date would not take place until 2020, but it was during his trial that he proudly proclaimed just how cruel and depraved he is. He would talk about how he enjoyed abusing women, but claimed that it was all consensual, and that he wasn't actually raping them. His victims, however, said that he would use their admiration for him to groom them and gain their trust, before turning on them and beginning his horrific abuse. They also said that they were imprisoned by him, and threatened with a handgun if they tried to escape or resist him. He also stabbed one of the women in the thigh. According to one of the women, he only found enjoyment when they resisted him. When they stopped fighting back, he would grow bored and find new targets. Solo freely admitted that he was a sadistic necrophile, and that he got pleasure from seeing other people cry. However, Solo still insisted that these acts were all consensual. The prosecution managed to get him to slip up though, as when they asked if he stopped when the women asked him to, he replied with, "Usually," before obviously realizing what he had just said and changed his answer to, "Always." Unfortunately for him, and fortunately for everyone else, the court knew that they had caught him in a lie, and were able to prove that his actions were in fact not consensual. He was convicted of over 30 counts of assault and sentenced to 24 years in prison, but in 2021, his sentence was actually increased to 30 years after his initial sentence was deemed to be too lenient. After more details came out about just how extreme his abuse of these women had been, many people called for him to be given a life sentence, but this was rejected, and he will be eligible for parole after serving 20 years. He may not have gotten the punishment he truly deserved, but he will at the very least spend all of his best years behind bars, and by the time he's released, few will remember the name Solo 45, though his victims will never forget the pain and suffering they endured at his hands. All I do is chop, 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 chop up a body, chop, 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 chop it up bodies is one of my favorite hobbies. Shane Coates is a horrorcore rapper, best known for being one half of the group Deviant Horror, alongside his wife, Ty Coates. As you may have guessed by their face paint, Shane and Ty are juggalos, having based their look on the Insane Clown Posse, and obviously following their footsteps by becoming a horrorcore duo. In 2016, the two opened their own independent record label, Deviant Horror Entertainment, through which they released all of their material, including their debut album, Blood, Sweat and Tears, in 2018. The album obviously didn't chart, as it was a quote underground release, as most Juggalo records are. The album did, however, get them noticed among the Juggalo community, and saw them getting some gigs afterwards, including a spot performing at the annual gathering of the Juggalos in 2019. Their song, Chopping Up Bodies, was also featured in the indie horror film Clown Motel, and the two of them were actually set to appear in the sequel. While it was obvious commercial success was always going to elude them, at the very least it seemed that they would be able to maintain a following among the Juggalo crowd, and probably get some more high-profile gigs and even another spot at the gathering of the Juggalos. That was until 2022, when Shane would find himself in some serious trouble with the law. On May 17th, Shane was arrested for the battery of a 13-year-old girl. This alone is horrific enough, but it becomes even more appalling when you learn that the victim was apparently his own daughter. Earlier that month, a Facebook page had been created called The Victims of Shane Coates, in which many anonymous women came forward, detailing their experiences with Shane. One told of how when she was 13, she was befriended by then 20-year-old Shane, who quickly began to show his true colors.